Friends, we are here with our second episode ever. That we've been jokingly not calling this a podcast for these two episodes because, oh man, all of the conversations that we could get into about prioritization, my two business lady friends here. Whenever I think of a cool idea, I think it all the way through and then I decide it's too much and I get stuck in this all or nothing mentality and then I just don't do it. So with this project, I decided to try to not do that to myself and actually just activate. So I was like, I'm not going to call it a podcast. We're just having conversations. It's no big deal. So here we are in our no big deal conversation, but it's hopefully a valuable and maybe somewhat entertaining one for people and sort of a selfish one for me. So last week we talked about anxiety and depression, which is something that I don't have much experience with, but Matt does. And we had some really great guests on who got to talk about it from the counselor side of things and then from an advocate because he struggled with it standpoint. So kind of bringing these diverse perspectives to the table. And that's what I'm always trying to do. I sort of am jokingly saying, this isn't a big deal, but I have been blessed to know a lot of cool people in my life. So why not connect them? And I have these conversations individually so often. I figure why not record them, talk about them in a way that might be helpful to other people. So for me, I'm going to do a quick throwback. I'm going to do a quick intro of our two guests here. First of all, for anybody who doesn't know us, I don't know who's on here that doesn't know us. That will be strange, but exciting if that's the case. So I'm Melissa, Melly for short. This is Matt, and we are a husband and wife photography team. That's the business that we run, but Matt is also a full-time professor at Florida Gulf Coast University teaching math. And we're both pretty obsessed with personal development. We love a lot of different books or podcasts or going to live events or whatever. We love doing all that kind of stuff. So I've always been the person in my life who people come to for advice and then get mad when I'm right. And I'm like, I don't even ever know why that's the case. It's just my gut instinct. I kind of speak from where I think, what I think is going to be best for people. And Christy, you and I have known each other now a long time, probably going on like maybe 15 years almost.
More, I think more, maybe.
I don't know. I think I was about 18. I just turned 32 this weekend. Woo, the big 3-2. The big 3-2, you know? It's like not known for anything. And so Christy, the way that she and I know each other is good old Best Buy. We worked at Best Buy for many years together. Not always in the same store, but when you work at Best Buy, you sort of know everybody. It's this weird, especially up in Boston where we're from, there are stores like you could throw a stone from one store to another and they're not super spread out. So we had a really tight community. And actually, when I graduated high school, I have a really elephant memory for numbers. So I graduated high school June 4th of 2006, and I was promoted to a supervisor role the next day. And 6 months later, Christy stole me from that store that I was in and took me under her wing at her store as a supervisor. And I learned a ton under her. And Christy, correct me if I'm wrong, weren't you the youngest female general manager when you got?
I was. Yeah. I don't know if I still hold the record anymore, but I was the youngest GM in the company when I was the AGM. So
cool. And how long were you GM for?
6 years. I got promoted to HR within a week of what would have been my 6-year GM anniversary.
Cool. And then you did HR for how long?
6 years.
Okay. 6 was your number. And that was at a like territory level, right? So you worked with several different stores, dozens at a time, and you had different leaders, tons of different leadership teams that you kind of oversaw, right?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, it was about 3 different districts, but it was really, that was the most fun because I got to meet a lot of people and do a lot of cool things and travel to a lot of cool places. So
that's awesome. I, as having been a leader at Best Buy, I never got to the GM level. I don't think that I would have necessarily excelled there, but I being in plenty of coaching sessions myself with leaders throughout those years, a big topic for me was always that, hey, you rock it at coaching and training, you're doing great at all these things, you suck at time management, figure it out. And I'd be like, okay. Because, I'd have these 14 things that had to get done, and I don't know if it was that I thought I had a better way of doing it, or I just didn't set the time aside right, but I would always find myself the day before everything was due trying to get everything done. That was just like procrastination central. Running my own business, I think I've gotten better, but it's still my biggest opportunity for sure. So I'm excited, Christy, to get into a little bit more about the differences between your Best Buy life and what you do now. So now you are a virtual fitness coach, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So you work from home 100% of the time.
Or wherever I want, but usually from home.
Yep. And you've got a little Beeb. How old is OG, Mr. Owen?
It's Owen. Yeah, he'll be, he's actually yelling right now, but I think he's okay. He will be 3 in September. So time is flying by. He's getting very big.
Cool. So you get to do all of that from home, and you've got to juggle that too. So cool. Megan. Megan. I don't know what to say about you. You're awesome. But Megan's kind of like a self-proclaimed time management master, and rightfully so, because this woman has put some serious time and effort into perfecting her routine. And I've only known her about maybe 3 or 4 years now, but the uptick in productivity that I've seen and the success that I've seen her achieve from a photography standpoint. So that's how I know Megan. She is an extremely successful portrait photographer. We always joke actually that while personality-wise, to a certain extent, we've got a lot of similarities, photography-wise, we are like polar opposites. She's like the most perfect, refined, wonderful portrait studio photography, and I'm like, let's go roll around in the sand. Like, we're totally different in that case, but I respect her big time, and I mean, every time she's got this badass Facebook group with like, I don't know, what, 12,000 photographers now? Something like that. 13,000. No one's counting. But
no. I keep waiting. I'm like, every time we hit a milestone, I'm like, where's 14,000? Let's go.
It's so cool, though. It's one of those things that I think Facebook groups have become a big thing, and they're wonderful in connecting to things you're interested in. But without a doubt, your group is one that I go to every single day because I know there will be value, and you're really good at not just giving us that value, but showing us how you create it. And that, like, I always, how many times a day do I turn to you and I'm like, that's what I want it to look like, you know, that vision of good. And what I love too, Megan, is that you will share with us your most vulnerable, hey, 7 years ago, look at this post I made where I was like, am I ever going to make it? Like, and what am I even doing this for, you know? And we have all been in those places, no matter what industry you're in, but I think it especially resonates with me because a lot of what I want to do looks a lot like what you are doing. So it's so cool. And so Megan has this really cool app. I may even share my screen later just so people can get very jealous and see what it looks like. But she actually even went so far as to have, so can you tell me about that? I know we're already tangenting a little bit, but I'm so excited. You created an app. Like, did you legit go out and find a developer and say, this is what I want my calendaring app to look like?
Yeah, it was funny because back in the day when we would teach our students, we would really hack it up. Eric would be at like 1 a.m. cutting out pieces of paper so that we could create this puzzle piece type design. And we'd be like, just put like this time slot here and this time slot here. And it was all very crafty. And we're like, that's not the level we want. We want it to be drag and drop, you know, really simple. And so finally I got the go ahead to create this. We worked with developers for 6 months. It's a desktop app. It just makes scheduling really fun and it's very productive. And so I just, about every 6 months, I'm just tweaking and making refinements. Of course, right now I have my quarantine calendar. And so I'm going in and like, okay, what can I do that's productive right now? So no matter where you're at, if it's summer break and you need a different calendar or you need like a fall calendar, you just switch it up and you can make your time as productive as you need to and put your priorities in the right place.
I love it. And it's color coded, which
yes.
I always hope is going to inspire me to do things. It doesn't always work, but that's my hope. So Megan, you are also a mom. You've got 2 not so beebs at home. How old are your kids?
14 and 12. Yep. Okay,
cool. And then Eric, who you mentioned, just for those who do not know, Eric is Megan's handsome and lovely husband.
Indeed.
So I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit about kind of how time management has seeped into, not so much seeped into, I think it's very intentional on your end that everybody be on the same page and that you guys are all as productive as you can be as a family. So I'm opening up my notes here. My printer did not work this morning, so I'm going digital. And I've got some prompts. I think I'd like to start talking about time management and routine, sort of like I don't know that we need a definition necessarily, but like, can you have one without the other necessarily? Is one more important than the other? And I don't know, does one of you want to kick it off with that? Does somebody feel inspired?
So time management as a definition, I would say it's just the most important thing to me is that your priorities are managed. Like I would call it priority management more than anything else, because we all have the same 24 hours in a day as Beyonce. And if you want to achieve big, it's how do you maximize every minute in front of you? And that's my goal. It's always like, how do I get the most done? Now, it doesn't always have to be the most done in terms of output. Getting the most done could be, did I go on an 1.5-hour walk and listen to a motivational book? That can be my most important priority in a given morning. So it's like putting your intention in the way that it's going to create the output and the life that you want.
Love. Okay. Chrissy?
I think a lot of times routine gets mistaken for time management, and routine isn't necessarily always a good thing. And so you very easily get into a, get home from work, sit on the couch, drink a beer, watch TV kind of routine. And although you have a routine, I mean, do you really want that one? Maybe, I don't know. But, but time management for me is, I measure it in, am I using my time efficiently? Am I getting things done that is going to move my business or family life or personal life forward? And if I'm starting to not feel that way or feel frustrated, usually that's when I have to go back in and start to tweak and figure out where I'm getting into some bad routines typically.
Mm-hmm. And actually that's a great segue. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And actually I struggled with the title of this episode. I was like, should it be priorities instead of routine? But I think I chose routine because I guess for me, I find myself craving routine, but I don't do great with it. Like doing the exact same routine every day doesn't excite me. I prefer prioritizing, I guess, what chunks absolutely have to get done and then moving my day around that. But then I'm like, gosh, that's overwhelming. I feel like then I have to like do this every week. Everything changes. But then it's like, what do you want? Beggars can't be choosers, right? Like, yeah. So I struggle with that a bit. But I wonder with you guys, how often do you find yourself tweaking your routine? How often do you evaluate your priorities, I guess, and kind of switch that?
For me, it's every 6 months. I think that's you can get enough information in that amount of time to be like what's working, what's not. Now, I will say that is shortened up when times change. So, I talked about like a summer calendar. If your kids are home from school, that might be a dynamic change. And quarantine calendar, that's a dynamic change. So looking at like, we've been on quarantine lockdown, whatever word you want to use it, 4 weeks in Southwest Florida.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So I had an intention of, okay, well, now that we're home, what can be done? So I created one calendar. And then 2 weeks later, I reevaluated. So it wasn't that I had to wait 6 months. I just had to wait till there was new information. And the new information was that I'm in the process of writing a book. So how can I use my most productive hours? And what I found was morning is my time. I'm an early bird. So I was like, okay, let's readdress this. Let's shift that towards the morning, and then I'm going to be most effective that way. So as soon as new information, if you find that there's ways to improve something, go in and tweak. There's no reason to wait. But most times we are going to be doing pretty predictable things, and Michael Hyatt, he's a really great productivity master and has a ton of books. And he talks about front stage, backstage activities. Like where do you have to be engaged with your client, front stage, and where do you have to be behind the scenes? So you could think of a routine more as creating, your backstage activities. So Thursday, we know, is our day to do ordering. So that is our routine. Every Thursday, we're going in, we're communicating with our vendors, we're getting the stuff out, we're doing what we have to do. And then Friday, meanwhile, is front stage. That's going to be shooting people. So that doesn't sound good. Photographing people. So we have to have our routine set, but that helps us stay predictable. And it just is much more effective to design things that way.
Do you get bored? Sorry, I want you to say what you're going to say, but I do want to ask also on this. I'm sure it'll relate to you, Christy. Do you get bored with the predictability?
No. How can you get bored?
Yes.
Because every time you have, if we're talking front stage, backstage, well, every Thursday is ordering day, but the activities are going to be different based on the client. And every Friday is portrait day, but the client in front of me is going to be completely different every time. So I can't get bored because the activity and the person is going to change, even if the task stays the same.
Okay, Christy.
Yeah, so I do get bored. I get bored very easily anyway, and I have to watch that, and I've had to watch that over time, and it's been a learned skill because it does take some discipline, and unless you have a strong desire to want to complete something, it's very easy to leave it off your plate in favor of something else that's more exciting. So there's a couple tricks that I've found to fix that, but because of that, I do find myself constantly reevaluating my routine to make sure it is the most productive use of my time because of my squirreliness. So a good for instance would be, probably when I first started this job as a virtual coach, I was 9 months pregnant and I was still working for Best Buy HR in a job that you were supposed to travel for 2 weeks out of the month. So I was asking for a lot of change at once, including introducing a human into my life. And so obviously the routines that I had up until that point were no longer going to work. And although this is an extreme example, I think, quarantine is another one where you can't necessarily plan even as well for that. And that got thrown into our lives. And that kind of exposes, I think, where you are creating routines and where you are really where you have strong time management skills. And so I don't think there's a perfect way to do it, although Megan sounds like she's really got it down. For me, it is a constant reevaluation, which is okay, because I think that allows you room for growth and room to improve.
I agree, though it's funny to hear you say that to a certain extent, because one of the things that I love the most about you is that I can confidently know that if I click on your Instagram story, like Christy was up between 5 and 6 and she's shaking her pre-workout in some like cute little outfit, and then she's doing her workout and I'm like, look at her go. Like, I know I'm going to see that, and that for me is, again, it's one of those situations where I'll turn to Matt and be like, I want to be like that. Like, that's just so good, And then I don't do that. So I'm working on it though. So are there things then, Christy, that you absolutely don't cheat on? Like, if you don't do this thing, well, I know you don't cheat on working out. I feel like that's probably your one biggest, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't. It's becoming a coach and doing it virtually. For me, it was really important that I didn't set a perfect example, but I showed people how it can fit into their real life, because fitness is very personal and it looks different for everybody. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is you do it somehow, whatever that looks like for you. And so I felt like by showing that on social media, people would see that I have a kid, I'm still busy, I'm a wife, I have another job, and I can make this happen. So at the beginning of my Instagram, it was meant for inspiration and to show people that. And then as it got hard, it actually became accountability in a welcomed way for me. So I started to show up when things were easy and fun and I had no kids and I went to CrossFit and everything was great. And then you have a child and things change, but people still need to fit fitness into their lives. So then it became the mornings where I didn't want to wake up at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. that I said to myself, Melissa's going to be waiting for my Instagram story today. And I have to show up. And honestly, some days that was the only reason why I did. So it worked well.
There are people like me who want to know what mug you choose in the morning. Megan, you need to know that Christy is a collector of mugs like you don't.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a little cup crazy in that house. It's good. How about you, Megan? Do you, is there something that you absolutely don't cheat on every day, that like your day will just not be complete if you don't do this thing?
Oh, well, it's hard to say because this last year has been the year of travel for me, and that's made it very up in the air with consistency, because it's like I'm 12 days a month flying somewhere, and so what do you do then? How do you create consistency there? So I don't know that I didn't have like that solid every day this happens, because every day something is different. But I will say, like, the one everyday thing that happens is every day I stick to the schedule, whatever the schedule might be. So it doesn't always mean the same thing is happening every day. It just means that I'm abiding by that. And I kind of want to touch on, like with Christy, I think like an important thing you're circling around here is the idea of identity. When you create your identity, like I am someone who people look up to. I am someone who shows up and works out every day. When that's part of your identity, then you live up to that. So for me, I've always been like, what does a world-class boss look like? And I thought to myself, what does a world-class boss do? So that's where I structure a lot of my day. I'm like, okay, does a world-class boss sleep until noon? Or does a world-class boss like wake up and hit the gym, you know? So I base things around that. And when it becomes your identity, you won't cheat on it. Because why would you cheat on yourself? If you identify this as who I am, then that's what you're going to stick to.
I think you have to, I will say, just to play a little devil's advocate, it's a whole nother conversation, but you do have to like yourself at minimum, but hopefully really love yourself to then stick to that identity and want to be out there with that. And that's a whole nother thing I like to talk about, but we won't get into that right now.
New show.
So Matt kind of came up with this question, so I want him to take it.
And I thought, Megan, what you were just saying was a really nice transition, because the thing that you don't, that you always adhere to, that you won't budge on, is that you have the schedule and you stick to the schedule. Do you find, or have you found at all along the way, that the schedule is actually limiting for you? And that there are things...
Is this getting to my favorite question about, like, does it stop freedom? Is that where we're going with this? Because I love that question.
Are there things, I mean, so this is very much about the two of you and the two of us, but for people who are very much still working on developing schedules for themselves and working on prioritization, I know for me, there was a point in time where I would go through and I would make a list of the 25 things that were priorities for me, and then I would shuffle them around and number them, and I would try to pick like the 5 or 6 that I really wanted to be the primary focus. But that meant that there were a lot of things that had higher numbers next to them that really, for the most part, had to be either let go of entirely or backburnered, or maybe I had grown out of them. So there's going to be a struggle for a lot of people in order to make those quote-unquote sacrifices. And has that happened to you along the way? Does that happen to you every 6 months? And what advice might both of you give to people who are trying to do some restructuring and reprioritization?
Well, the best thing I think that you can do is to let go of the idea that you can get it all done, because you can't. You won't. Like, if your goal is every day, I'm going to do the 3 most important things for my life and my business. If that's all you do is you accomplish 3 amazing things, then you're going to be head and shoulders above everyone else, because most people are just like chasing their tail, doing the thing that's urgent but not important. So if you do the thing that you've placed priority and importance and urgency on, then, and you do 3 of those a day, you're ahead of the game. So the limitation is that you feel like I can't do this if I do that, right? Like, I'm going to sacrifice because I'm not going to get to all these things. But if you remember the priorities, and you're like, but I am going to do these 3 most important things. And that's why, like, right now we're doing in our group Rise to the Top, we're doing that the check-in is the daily check-in for our productivity challenges, that you simply say your wellness goal, your connection goal, and your business goal. And those are the 3 most important things any human can be doing right now. How am I going to take care of myself? How am I going to make important connections? And what 1 thing can I do in my business? Not what 12 things, what 1 thing. So if that's your thing, well, yeah, maybe you could say, oh, I'm sacrificing because I'm not doing 12 things now. I'm only doing 1. Right, but you're doing 3 holistic things that are going to keep you well and safe. Then that's great movement forward. So I never see it as limiting, because I always see that there's power in choosing the 3 best things.
And I have to imagine, like, using the book that you're writing as an example, you probably had the idea, just like I had the idea for a podcast 2 years ago, that you probably wanted to write a book maybe 2 years ago, but the time wasn't there. It wasn't the priority.
Oh, it wasn't the priority. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think that even just something that I've been saying about doing this, and the reason I was so jazzed to just be inviting people to talk, was because I found in my personal development journey that sometimes I can hear something 10 times, but it's the 11th way that I hear it that matters, until I'm like, wow, I already knew that. Why did it take me this long? And so sometimes just to hear the different perspectives, and for you to, remind that to make sure you understand as a person that you're not going to get all the things done. I need to hear that all the time, because I'm convinced I can get all the things done. Nope. He's laughing at me. That was laughing at me, not with me.
Maybe.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. Christy, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, one of the exercises that I used to do with managers who felt like they were kind of on that hamster wheel of just never getting enough done or leaving the day, excuse me, leaving the day feeling like they were accomplished, is to take a notebook and do this for 2 days straight. Take a notebook, and from the moment you wake up, that hour, just number a page, a notebook page with every hour, 6 a.m., 7, 8, 9. And at the end of that hour, you're setting an alarm on your phone for each hour. Write down what you did that hour. And it really sucks because it takes up a lot of time and it's really annoying. But you have to do it for 2 days, because the first day you're going to fudge some stuff and make it sound better than it is. And the second day you'll do it correctly. But it really shows how much time you do have in your day that you're unknowingly wasting or using for maybe different, I shouldn't say wasting, but using for different purposes and what's going to be productive for you. And it just kind of opens your eyes. So for instance, it could be, for me, I spend some time with Owen, but sometimes I get caught up in watching Mickey Mouse Clubhouse when he's not in the room. I don't know why I do that. That's just a thing. And so could I be using that time more productively when he's not even sure? I'm sure there's something else I could do, but you'd be surprised what kind of things pop up. I don't think we intentionally, especially as business owners, try to waste time. I mean, we think we're always productive or active at least, but I think there's a difference between being efficient and being productive.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I've gone through a lot of food struggles in my life, like a lot of the digestive and blah, blah, blah. And food journaling is one of the biggest recommendations, of course. Like, how did you feel after you ate this thing? Oh man, dude, I hate doing journals like that.
It's so useful.
Yeah, I know it is useful, but it is work. It is absolutely work. Yeah. Okay. So where have you guys, ladies, used any particular structure? Was there a book that you used, a podcast that you heard, something that helped you start? Like, where do you start? I mean, it makes sense to me to think, okay, I know, like, those podcasts are a great example. I knew I wanted to do it Mondays. I love a good challenge. I'm determined to strategize how I can make sure it doesn't take a huge amount of my time, but that I still do it well. And so I'm like, all right, well, I need this time block on Monday, and I need maybe a couple of hours on Sunday at minimum, maybe like an hour on Friday, if even that. So then now I chunk around that, right? And that kind of has served as an anchor point for me. And I was just telling Natalie, my employee today, I was telling her, it's been a blessing in disguise, not only because I'm loving like doing this, I'm super excited about it, but it's also helping me do the things that I should have done in my photography business from the beginning, the foundational like efficiencies and systems. And it's showing me how easily possible it is to do with the proper intention there. So it's kind of funny. It's helping me do something in the thing that I've already been doing for 5 years now that you think I would have already gotten down. So that's kind of interesting. But that was sort of my example to say, like, is there a structure where you say, this is how I would recommend starting and then working around that? Whoever wants to take it, go for it.
You want to have at it, Christy? What you got?
Sure. I think, and I'll just use fitness since that's my thing. I think a lot of the problem is people just have a hard time starting, and it's kind of like what you said about the podcast, or in fitness, let's say you're running a marathon. If you are looking to say, if you want to run a marathon, focusing on the goal of 26.2 miles and making that what everything's designed about is probably going to be not only daunting, but not make it a really fun experience to get to that point. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is you have to start by walking your first mile, or walking faster your second mile, or, jogging lightly your third mile. It's not, you don't just go from 0 to 100. So chunking it down into little goals has always been helpful for me and helpful for getting somebody started into a new routine. So if it's something, again, with fitness, it isn't always fun for a lot of people, and it isn't something they desire to do, hence the reason why they need somebody to help push them in that direction a lot of times. And so that could be just something simple like I want you to set your clothes out the night before and just put on your workout clothes today. You don't even have to work out. Just put on your workout clothes today. And you're that much closer to get it because you're already, I'm in my workout clothes. I might as well do something. So maybe they go for a walk. And it sounds so simple and so silly when it's that little, but I think now you have a win. I have my workout clothes on, so I'm one step closer to that goal of working out 5 days a week, So taking little things at a time for me has been helpful in starting new routines. I also do it with, I hate putting away my laundry. So I say, I'm going to take 10 minutes and I'm just going to do this for 10 minutes. And I set a timer on my phone and I, for 10 minutes, do my laundry, and 9.5 times out of 10, I go longer than 10 minutes because you're already going and already doing it, and it's easier. It's just getting started. That's usually the hardest and most daunting part.
You and I have so many similarities, Christy. Laundry and I are also not, we don't do good once the laundry's done.
Not buddies.
Just
No.
sits there.
I try to lay it out and put it on the bed so that it's in the way.
No.
Doesn't
So does my husband.
get back into the hamper. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Megan probably doesn't have that problem. Megan, can you?
No. Megan does her laundry, I bet you.
No, I don't. I outsource it.
Oh, there you go. See,
You got to outsource everything. No, I would say to the analogy of the marathon, I think if I were going to run a marathon, which I have no desire to do, but if I were, I would start by understanding what does a marathon look like. And I would want to be like, let me feel, what does it feel like to go 26 miles? Even if I was just going in my car, let me get the lay of the land. So the best advice I would have is, and along those lines is that, like, you don't want to, of course, the quote about don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. Like, I'm on chapter 20 of time management, and I have so many systems. I have layers upon layers, and they all work together. But I didn't start there. It took like one piece at a time. But the first thing I would do is I would get the lay of the land. I would go to a productivity expert, if it's in a book, Michael Hyatt. We have a workshop on time management, stuff like that. I would get the lay of the land. And then I would go in and I would do the first thing. So the best book, I probably read about 4 to 6 productivity books a year. But the book that I think would be really accessible to people is Atomic Habits. Atomic, like ATOMIC. And I like that book because he talks about the logistics of starting a habit. Like, how do you set your environment to support you? How do you set your intentions and goals? And so if you could then, that book could help you get the lay of the land, like what is in store for me if I'm going to be a productivity master. But then you could start with that one thing. And then just know that, like, hey, if you master it, 3 months later, you can add a new element, and then you can add a new element. And so eventually, here I am, and then this many years later, and now there's element upon element, but it didn't all start at once. It started like understand the course and then start with step 1.
I like that.
Yeah.
Follow up.
I think you actually answered my question, Megan, and really, and Christy. Christy's is a little bit more applicable, I feel like, because you're not going to be working out all day. But when you take that and you translate it over to almost like a business model, and you're trying to structure your entire business day, I was going to ask, do you think it would be reasonable for somebody to add a rigid or more rigid structure to the first 3 hours of their day, or some selected grouping of 3 hours of their day, and see how it feels to really buckle down and stay focused on a few tasks, 1 per hour for 3 hours, and then try to grow it from there. And Megan, you're saying that kind of building it, and you've got all these layers, but you didn't start with multiple layers. You started with 1. So I think it sort of answers that question.
And I would maybe even start even bigger. Like, if you think of it, like even your word choice of rigid, would you start with rigid? Rigid to me is a painful term, and it feels really constricted. I would think about, and I think the biggest devil's advocate thing that people say is they say, if I'm this, I could never do that. I'm spontaneous, especially with artists, right? I could never do that. I'm too spontaneous. That's going to be too limiting. If you think of it as limiting, you're not going to want to do it. So I would go the other way with it and think of it like get into a state of dreaming, right? Artists should be great at this. Get into a state of like, what is the life I'm creating? And start on the biggest scale possible. Like this year, if I can create my dream life, I'm going to go on vacation every quarter. And I would start by like, look at your calendar and be like, what vacations am I taking? Which quarters? And then I would look at, okay, well, if my quarter looks like that, what do I need to do to get on that vacation? I need to make money. So what does this 3-month span look like? Okay, if I do this year, this year, this year, and then take it back even more on a weekly basis. If I'm going to achieve my month, that means my week has to look like this. And then when you start phrasing it out like that, you're like, okay, if I know my week looks like this, it's not that my week is limiting or my week is rigid or painful. It's that my week is freeing me. My week is creating this income, this lifestyle. Like that's what my life is doing for me. And I can work in the way that I deem that I want to work. You know, if you want to be an early bird, great. If you want to work at night, great. But create the life that works for you. And then how awesome is that? Like, you know, Christy, you talked about the watching Mickey Mouse with your son. How amazing would it be if you said, I'm going to spend a half hour watching Mickey Mouse with my son. That's our bonding time. That's freedom. And if you put that on your calendar and you both enjoy that, look what you just created in a half hour versus like you just happen to be stuck on the couch because you didn't plan any better. That's not freedom. That's not what people want out of life. They're just stumbling into that existence instead of planning for their existence.
Well, I do. Sorry. I completely agree with you. And it's funny because as I was adjusting to this life, and I've been doing the virtual coaching thing for just about a little over 2 years. So it's still, I still find it as something new to me and something I'm kind of always taking pulse points on and adjusting. Of course, it's what is happening outside here. And
I saw that, by the way.
I started making myself feel guilty for not feeling accomplished at the end of the day, because when you go from a structure in a corporate environment where you're working 9 to 5 and have a boss looking and things to be managed, and you have no boss over your shoulder when you're an entrepreneur, when you're running your own business, so you have to get things done. And I would get to the end of my day and I would have spent time with Owen or have done work or have things, there were things that happened, but I didn't feel accomplished and I couldn't figure out why. And as I peeled it back a little bit, I was feeling like because I was home and able to work from home that I should be working all of the time. And I didn't have set business hours. And if there's one thing that's changed my feeling of productivity, if nothing else emotionally, is setting business hours throughout the day. And like Matt mentioned before, I'm a productive morning person. Like I am a 5 or 6 a.m.er and I get my best work done while Owen's still asleep in those few hours. And so my business hours are 5 to 8. Owen takes a nap, usually from 12 to 2, thankfully right now. I know he won't always, but right now he does. So I have 2 more hours that I have more things to get done. And I have off time so that I can play with my child and not feel bad like I should be doing work, or other things where I might watch an hour of This Is Us. And that's what I decided to do because I've scheduled in that time, where before I was still doing it, but I was feeling really shitty about it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, damn, I can't believe I sat down and watched that for an hour when I could have been doing X, Y, and Z. So business hours for me has definitely been a big helpful addition to.
Dude, the truth of working from home and feeling like that, like, yeah, that's just all of the truth. I mean, like, the first too long after when I was working from home before we had our gallery space, and even sometimes after we first had it and I was trying to figure out, do I go in there every day? What am I doing? Matt always tells people now when we have this conversation, he's like, well, at least you don't fall asleep on the couch with your like hands on your keyboard anymore as often as you used to. That's a real, that was a reality for a long while. And to your point, I would do that after a 16-hour day and somehow still focus on the things I didn't get done and be upset with myself. So I feel like I've learned how to be kinder with myself in that sense. And I think now I'm really pushing toward figuring out what that ideal routine looks like for me that's not the same every day. Because, and I was actually telling Matt, I don't know if this has been similar for you guys, I'd love to hear. So it seems like a lot of people are like falling back into old habits, whether good or bad, just nostalgically during this quarantine time. I don't know if it's because we're spending more time at home, or like I was talking to my friends who I used to game with online when I was younger, and like old games that we used to play, like Halo or whatever. There's like triple the amount of people playing now because they're home and have the time to, and they're like wanting to do old things. We're like watching old movies or just doing things that we used to do before that we've kind of, I thought, grown out of. And one of those things for me was when we used to work at Best Buy, you never had a set schedule working retail, of course. So I'd have probably 2 days or maybe 3 days a week where I was working till 9 or 10 p.m. and then I might work an early shift or whatever. But I thrived off of that, and then I would get home and then I'd be up till 2 a.m. with my brain would still be going, and I'd be doing, all these different things. I've been trying to be a morning person. I love the idea of being that person who gets up at 5 a.m. and just gets all these things done. And I've had a couple of spurts of that, and then it's like it like has left me. And recently during quarantine, I feel like my creative hours have been at night. And finally I just said, why am I fighting this? I was like trying to get myself to go to sleep at 9, 10 so I could get up at 5 so I'm like, why? Where are we going? Like I can work till 1 if I wanted to. That might not be really the best. But I'm being more flexible with myself to choose that. But I think I need to find, based on what you guys are saying, you know, Megan, you say you reevaluate every 6 months, but you're like at, you know, you're like legendary status on the time management mastery scale. So like, we're not quite there yet, but you know, Christy, you're saying you evaluate when you kind of feel like you have to. I don't know if you can kind of put an average time on that. Cause I think you probably have to, you should try something for X amount of time to make sure it does work or does not work. You got to give it a chance.
I would say monthly. I would say at the end of the month, when I'm revisiting the last week of the month of what I want to do differently for the next month, it's probably 30 days. And it's not like overhaul, but it's like, what tweaks can I make here and there to make it a more efficient month?
Right. One day, Christy, you're gonna achieve legendary status too.
I aspire. That's my goals.
Whether it's the marathon or the entire year, generally speaking, both of you started with actually big picture, what's the goal, and then whittling it down and coming up with an outline that, yes, it can be flexible. Yes, sometimes if there's a pandemic, you have to reevaluate weekly. Otherwise, if things are normal, but your child is growing and has different demands, then it changes monthly maybe. But that idea of having that sort of broad view of things, I think it's really beneficial to me. And I think I knew that already, but as Melissa said, you got to hear it that 11th way. And then maybe it clicks. Yeah, that's great.
And also, Melly, don't feel bad about like sleeping in, because there's a great book. It's called The Power of When, W-H-E-N, and it talks about chronotypes and that different people are just biologically different. And the best thing you can do for yourself is to tune into your chronotype. And if it says you're a morning bird, you're a morning bird. It's weird because my husband is, in the book, they call it a wolf. And my characteristic is a lion. And they said these two personality types never meet in nature because they're just so opposite. So it's funny because like he will go to bed at 4 a.m. and I will wake up at 5 a.m. And it's just like, okay. But we are both most productive when we do what's in our nature. And so he knows, like, if the sun's set, do not talk to me about a business decision because my brain stops working. And I always throw that back in his face because I'm like, I'm going to wake you up at 5 a.m. and I'm going to start asking you business questions. So you have to like do what's in your nature. And I mean, the cool thing is this is such an awesome opportunity right now because we don't have any structure on us right now. So you can really be like, what is feeling good to me right now? And that can tell you a lot about your nature. Like, does it feel good to wake up with the sunrise? Does it feel good to wake up earlier, later? And if you're really like leaning into that, you're going to find some great answers while you're at it. One cool thing I found is that like, oh my gosh, maybe I don't have to work 12 hours a day because I'm getting a ton done working 6 and 7 hours a day. And that was a really aha moment for me because I think that there's kind of like that hustle grind where people are like, you have to work, you have to work. And if you start realizing, wow, if I just prioritize, I can get as much done in half the time and then I can chill more. You know, that's kind of a cool thing. So there's a lot of cool discoveries that can be had right now.
Are either of you guys, I know Tony, Christy, you and I have talked about Tony Robbins a little bit. I don't know, Megan, I think we've chatted with a little bit about it, but are you guys familiar with his rapid planning method? Have you heard of that? It's like one of his old school, because like Tony's been around since the dawn of time, right? So it's like you can get it like on tape or CD. So I have the CD in my car because I have nowhere else to play a CD. But it reached the point in the CD where he says, if you're in the car right now, you're going to want to like pull over or stop or do this somewhere else because you need to write some stuff down now. And you guys might not be surprised to know that CD is still in my car for like a year now, and I just listen to it on repeat. So I've learned a lot on disc 3 of Rapid Planning Method. However, I have a friend who is a Tony Robbins results coach as of somewhat recently. And so he and I met the other day, and he was helping me put together what's called a Rapid Planning Method plan, I guess really would be the right thing. And it's exactly what you're saying, Megan, but just different ways. So basically RPM stands for Rapid Planning Method. However, it also stands for results, purpose, and massive action. So when you make a plan, you think of like, for example, we're redoing our website. So that's what we did ours on. We did website content. And it's really cool. The first step is that you take every single thing that needs to be done in that task. And then, first you want to think of the overarching purpose, like how will you feel when this is done? What is your purpose behind doing your website? Why are you doing it? And think of every single thing that you're going to feel so you can put yourself in that state of like, oh my gosh, I really do want that. So you start with the purpose, start with the end. You give yourself a date that you want to complete it by. So you've got this time chunk, and that can be moved, of course, it can be adjusted. And then you talk about the massive action you have to take, what each of those steps is, and then you give certain deadlines to each one. And it's just a different way of saying what you were saying, Megan, and even in the fitness world, Christy, like same thing with the marathon. Like, what's that overall big goal? And then reverse engineering. Like Gary Vee talks a lot about reverse engineering anything you do to get back to how to get to that end goal. So that was really useful and honestly super eye-opening for me because, gosh, the website, like we've been working on it for way too long. Megan knows, like, looking through 10,000 photos, and it's not going to actually be 10,000 photos, but that's what I've told myself. I'm like, I have to look at every photo I've ever taken to decide what's going to go on there. I'm like, I've turned it into this gigantic, huge, impossible thing. And then I sat down with my buddy Danny for like 30 minutes and made this plan. And I was like, I can do this in 3 weeks. This is fantastic. And I probably don't even really need the full 3 weeks, but I'm trying to give myself some patience and some wiggle room. So cool. All right. Awesome. I want to switch over to the tools. So I think we've started to kind of hear kind of some of that stuff, but actually really quickly before I do that, I just want Christy for you to know that Brad commented that he's 100% scheduling 8 to 8:30 a.m. to watch Paw Patrol with his kid every day. So you have been fired.
Wonderful.
You'll be in Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, he'll be Paw Patrolling, and then Megan and her family watch like all of the movies.
All of them.
All of the movies. Yes, I always look forward to
it.
it.
And that's literally on my calendar. It's like 1 hour, 1 to 2 hours every night we watch movies.
How do you guys decide what to watch? Do you have a list or?
It changes. Sometimes it's consensus, which ends up being we spend an hour deciding. And sometimes someone just takes the reins and be like, my pick.
I can imagine that could get that scrolling through and 30 minutes later, you're like, have I not found anything?
Yeah.
It's really a very big first world problem we have. So I ask my friends to come prepared with some valuable tools. I think we've already done some cool stuff, but some tangible, like, in my mind, it makes sense to just say like 2 abstract concepts. So things, Christy, like you said, discipline. I always think of discipline when I think of time management. And I think like my dad always told me I wasn't disciplined enough. So like discipline actually has like, it's almost like a trigger word for me. I just don't like it. So it's like that rigidness. But if there are 2 abstract tools that each of you feel have been paramount, at least for you, to get to where you are in your time management journey and what you think can be important for others, and then 2 concrete tools that people can use, whether it's book or podcast you love or whatever. So let's start with Christy. Christy, go for it. What do you got?
So for abstract, I would say number one thing would be to not pick up your phone until it's time for you to pick up your phone in the morning or whenever you get up. If you get up at noon, that's fine too. But if it's, for me, that has been such a big, again, I'm squirrel brained, so I'm very easily distracted by shiny objects. So if something else really exciting comes along, I'm gone. So I know that, and I've learned that. But what I found is when I wake up on the offensive of on my time, I have my start today journal, which I choose to use, but I have, I do my gratitude, I have my coffee, I write down my affirmations for my life, I read my book, like I have all of my things that I do in the morning, and that routine is what sets me up for a great day. So for me, that is, that started with when I was picking up my phone, I was opening social media and I was seeing stuff that happened, or maybe I talked to a client and then they were mad about something or happy or whatever. And it puts me on their time and their agenda, and not doing that anymore has been super huge for my business. So
I have to ask something really quickly on that. Since your business is like on your phone, right? Like all that stuff you're talking about, like you're storing it. So is your phone in airplane mode? Or are you just really good at not looking at any notifications?
So in the morning, I don't need it yet. So I haven't started my day. So I haven't begun work, is probably the best way to say it. And work is my phone. So when I pick it up, I bring it with me to the office. And the only thing I do, which you don't have to go into I do not disturb at night. So it doesn't come on till 7 a.m. So I don't get any pop-up notifications that are very tempting to want to open. But otherwise, I just take a picture of whatever you see in the morning, like my book and my mug and all that stuff. But that's just with my camera. So I don't actually swipe up until I'm done with all of my book, my pictures, whatever I decide to do.
Nice. Yeah, that does not disturb. Sweet. Okay, carry on.
The second thing is that we didn't really talk a lot about, but I think you wanted to make it another episode, which I would gladly be on, is my Misty, which is what I call her. And that's like that evil voice in the back of your head that says really mean things to you all of the time and tells you that you're not organized or not disciplined or can't do it, or you would never wake up, or you'll never stay up late, or whatever mean things that person says. We all have that person. I just chose to name her Misty. But I think since I've acknowledged that she existed, as you said, this is abstract. You asked.
No, I love it.
Since I acknowledged that she existed, especially in the entrepreneur space, or a space where there isn't really like a very strict, this is what you need to do to be successful. You're kind of going about it on your own, and it's all on you, whether or not you succeed. That voice gets louder. And I mean, I've been in corporate forever, so the voice was there. But like, if you follow Best Buy's rules, you get it done. But when you create the rules and you do the stuff, that voice is like, you can't do this. Like, who do you think you are thinking you can get this done? And she still says mean things, but I acknowledge her. So I would say, don't always give your Misty all of the credit for things, especially as it's new, because Misty is going to say, who do you think you are creating this new routine? Or you're not going to be able to stick with this. Like, you've never stuck with a routine before. She's going to say those things. So be prepared to hear her and say, thank you, Misty, so much for your opinion, but we're not going to listen to you right now, Misty. I say meaner things, but that's what I think. Yeah. That's been really.
I think I want to name mine Misty. I'm very
Best ever.
You sure can. Whatever
That's
works.
awesome. Okay, let's switch over to Megan's abstract rules, and then we'll switch over to the concrete ones. Go for it, Megan. I love those, Christy.
Yeah. Okay. Abstract. Well, I'm going to have more concrete than abstract, because concrete is like my jam. But one abstract concept that I want to share is that, would it surprise you to know that I'm actually not an organized person by nature? I'm actually not like, I didn't start as a time management master. I'm not, it's not in my nature. So I think when I think about abstract, my husband is actually the more organized of both of us, but no one's turning to him for organization advice, because to him it's just so natural. So he's like, I don't get it. If you have a task to do, you just put it in your phone and then you do it, right? And I'm like, no. Like, I have to create systems, structure, calendars, to-do lists, timers. Like, my methods are all concrete, because I'm almost like, I wouldn't say I'm in a battle with my nature, but I would say like we're in a friendly competition. So like, I have to use the resources I can and develop resources to make myself stronger, because it's just not my nature. So, but I'm really loving it now. And I think like another cool thing is, from the abstract point of view, a very cool concept is that you can change anything about yourself at any time. And like, you almost have to like hear that again. You can change anything about yourself at any time, because most people won't believe that. And they might say it, but do you really believe it? Because if you really believe that if there's something you don't like about yourself right now, you can change it like that, like that's it. So what I didn't like is, again, I was looking at who's the world-class boss, and I was like, I am not the world-class boss right now. So how do I close that gap? And I had to put systems in place, and now I like it, even though it's against it was against my old nature, but my new nature embraces it and goes with the concrete tools.
I love that. That's good. Sweet. Okay, you can kick off with your concrete tools then. Give it to us.
Oh, there's so many. Okay, so so I'll share what I'm going to share with your audience is that one tool is just, I have a sheet I call Elevate and Execute. And Elevate is what are the things that are going to bring you closer to your big vision. And so those are usually the more challenging ones, and the things that are important but not necessarily urgent. Like, we all know the urgent tasks. The urgent tasks are like, oh my God, my client needs XYZ right now. That's the urgent. But the important is website, right? Like, if you don't do website, no one cares. No one's like knocking down your door, where's your website? So you need to choose to do that. So that's what I would call an elevate task. And an execute task is, what are the daily to-dos that you must do? And so what this worksheet does is, it kind of is like a brain dump. It lets everything get out on paper, and you just write anything possible that you could be doing. Just get it all down there, like write as fast as your hand can go. I even keep it next to me as I'm working. I have a binder wherever I go, it's with me. And then if something pops in my head, I don't have to go do it. I just have to put it down. So the freedom of like, once the idea is in your head and once it's down on paper, you've accomplished it. There's peace in that, because I know it's very easy to want to jump at the next email ping. But if you instead say, oh, there's an email ping, I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to put it on my list right now. And now it's handled where it needs to be. It's on my list. And then eventually at the bottom of the sheet, you boil down to what are the things you must do. And that's where you pick your top 3. And this is similar to Christy was mentioning earlier about hour by hour, what are you accomplishing? So hour by hour, you can define what your goals are. As long as it includes your top 3 most important things, then you're good to go. So that's definitely a concrete tool that I'll share with your audience. The other concrete tool, if you do want to make people jealous, Melissa, you're welcome to screen share. But that drag and drop, that app we created is really awesome. I love that. It's actually part of a $2,500 program. So we're not making that. We are making it sort of free. It's going to be during quarantine time. We want to provide something for our audience that is really valuable. So for professional photographers, if you join Rise to the Top with Megan DiPiero, we made a special extension on that freebie. And so it is on till, I want to say, Wednesday. So that is something you can only access in that day. It's back to the vault, back to the $2,500 program. But that's something we can make available for you guys too. So I think between those two, like writing down your stuff, using that daily sheet, and then having your big overarching calendar. And then another concrete tool I would say is a really great book is the 12-week year. And that one changed my life because, again, thinking through what is your goal, what are you creating as an entrepreneur, part of what you're creating is you're creating a lifestyle. So knowing that I can have a break every quarter, and we've even expanded that. Now we do sometimes like a full break and then a mini break. And so, talk about freedom. A lot of people would say, I don't have the discipline to do what you do. And I'm like, dude, my freedom's amazing. Like, check this out. I'm going to Europe. I'm going to New York. We're going to go see Hamilton again. Like, I love it. So I'm just like, what is my life creating, and putting those breaks in there so I can feel that joy for the hard work I'm doing. That's really valuable to me too.
I love that. And so I was going to say, Christy's going to have to pretend she's a professional photographer she's going to her app real quick.
I use my phone really well.
You do. You have a great eye, Christy. Well, thank you, Megan. That's super generous. Whatever you share with me, people, if you can share, anybody who's interested can share their email address with me, and then I can get that over to them. So thank you so much. That is amazing. You rock. And basically every time Megan puts a recommendation for a book in her group, in the Facebook group, which is called Rise to the Top, I'm like, Amazon, Audible, like whichever one, and then I get it. So I do have the 12-week year, and I actually took it all the way to Bora Bora with us, and I was like, I'm going to read this. Didn't read it.
No, you got to read it.
Yeah, I know. I'm working on it.
Maybe not in Bora Bora. Maybe don't read it there.
Yeah, maybe not. That's every time we go anywhere, and like we usually road trip this summer for 6 to 8 weeks sometimes, and we'll go all these different places. I bring like 4 books with me, and Matt's like, you're not going to read any. You're not going to do it. And like, I'm just so excited about everything else going on that I just, and I'm so good at routine that I never put that time aside, but 12-week year I've heard so many good things about. So I do want to check that one out. Christy, are you familiar with that one? I know you're a big fan. Yeah.
Yeah. It's nice because it takes kind of the pressure off of getting to, if your entrepreneurial year runs January to December, you get to November and you're like, oh crap, like what am I, I have 2 months left to finish off this year, versus looking at your year as a big picture. And
is Owen coming?
Yeah, not yet, but he's yelling about something. So I don't know what's happening yet. I have that. I'm looking at the monitor over there. But it is good for people who are not naturally structured. I think it's a nice way for them to think about their business in smaller chunks, more manageable.
Cool. Okay. And what are your 2 concrete tools, my dear?
Well, for me, I think my hours that I have in the morning have completely shifted the way that I run my business, and it's super valuable to me. So The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod is a book that I have my coaches read. I think it is a really great way to, if you're open-minded enough and are willing to try out a new something with your mornings, it can really change your vibes for the entire day. So it really does, it kind of shows you how when you start off on the offensive, not the defensive, how it kind of trickles down throughout the rest of your day. And you can find pockets of time to do the most important things when you prioritize them before the day kind of comes at you. So for me, that has been super helpful. And then one of the ones that's like a lifetime, you've probably seen it a million times, especially Best Buy was kind of famous for it, is the 7 Big Rocks video for Stephen Covey. That's just a nice 3-minute video you can go on YouTube and look at. And it's a great visual to see when we have the big stuff done, how the rest of the things can filter in. But if we fill up half of our day with the craziness that happens, a lot of times we lose out on some of the most important things. So time management wise, that's helpful. And then the last thing, it isn't necessarily time management, but it's really easy and anybody can do it, is grabbing a calendar and just creating a visual for your whatever 30 days of whatever new habit you want to create, and creating some kind of reward or punishment, depending on how you respond, at the end of that 30 days for whatever that is. So, let's say you want to exercise, let's say, and your goal is to exercise three days a week, every week, and the other 2 you're going to stretch. So 5 days a week, you're getting movement in some way. You X off your big things or give yourself a gold star or whatever, however you like to recognize yourself. And at the end of the month, you can celebrate maybe with, a cute workout outfit, or maybe you like, I don't know, whatever you like, a new My Little Pony or something. I don't know. But whatever, I don't know where that came from. Whatever you enjoy recognizing yourself with, that just got weird. Do that. Or like, let's say Iz and I do this a lot, especially as he's fallen out of habits a few times because fitness is not his number one thing, my husband. So we'll do financial competitions where if your goal is 5 days this week, if you get in all 5 days, you owe me nothing. If you get in 4 days, you owe me $20. If you get in 3 days, you owe me 40. And the financial repercussions is a big motivator for him, and it works really well. So, you can do that with another friend or accountability buddy, but having that calendar and the visual is a nice way to not sweep it under the rug if you have a goal that you're going towards.
I like that financial one. That's good.
It works.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to, in all of our posts, what, were you going to say something else? Oh, no, sorry. I looked over there and your hand was moving, but that's delayed. We have another computer up over here. Anyway, so I'm going to, basically, this will live obviously here on Facebook. You guys will be tagged in it. I will upload the full, it'll still be basically raw, but none of that technical difficulty in the beginning. Will come off, and then that will be on YouTube. And then we're always kind of, our Instagram is going to serve as a, like, here's what's coming up next, here's what we did last week. And so your handles will all be available there. I would say, Megan, are you only doing coaching for photographers, or are you doing entrepreneurial coaching overall?
Photographers.
Just photographers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you are a professional photographer, I highly recommend Megan. She's fantastic. If you are not part of the Rise to the Top with Megan DiPiero group on Facebook, you should be. It is fantastic. Christy has the hashtag FitSquadFam.
Mm-hmm.
That FitSquadFam. And that is a Facebook group that you get access to when you are their virtual coach, correct?
Correct.
So one of my fave things about Christy, and another way that we are similar, is that she's very varied in her knowledge, which I love. Like, how many coaching certifications? You're like an Orange Theory coach. You've done like so many different things before you've gotten to now. So I love that. And she's got a lot of value, and she's very funny. So I like people who are funny. You guys should get in on that action. If you want to see what mug she's using tomorrow morning, you got to go follow her on Instagram to get that information. Yep. Also very cute pictures of her son. God, he's just the cutest.
Yes. Imperfectly _healthy on Instagram.
Yes, imperfectly _healthy. That will all be tagged in places. You'll see the, especially like the YouTube description will have all the information. And we will need to also link to the books that you guys suggested so that people can easily find them. Is there anything else that either of you would like to share before we go? And then also, audience, I didn't say this at the beginning. I know I've seen us fluctuating up to about 10 people here and there, which is cool. But if there's anybody who has any questions, I should have said that at the beginning. You're always welcome to pop in. But is there anything else that either of you would like to say today?
I don't know. We hit them all. We hit all the questions. Very cool.
I think we did. Yeah, I'm just reviewing. I feel like we hit everything. Matt, do you have anything else that you would like to say, my love?
Not I. I'm good. No, very grateful for the two of you taking the time to come out and to share and to kick around some ideas.
It was fun.
Awesome. Yeah.
Next week, we will be meeting same time, same place, Facebook Live, 11:30 a.m. And the topic next week will be perseverance and dreams. Our two guests will be a good friend of ours, Stephanie Bunnett, who owns our favorite cafe here in Southwest Florida, Kanjani. She is a really cool story. She's a Zimbabwean refugee. So with the political oppression going on there for so many years, her family was able to get out, and then they came here. She worked at Starbucks for a long time and thought, I really want to open my own cafe, and I want to open my own nonprofit. And she has gone forward to do those things. So coming from a really what feels like a hopeless background, how do you kind of push through that? And our second guest will be, I'm so stoked about this. It's like my favorite thing is connecting people too, right? So like I was so stoked to connect you guys also. And our second guest will be Kayla Ray. I used to work with her at Dunkin' Donuts back in the day up in Boston. We were reminiscing on it the other day. She went to Berklee College of Music at that time. She has an incredible voice, and she would just like, we'd be working the 4:30 a.m. shift, and she'd be like belting her heart out. And I was like, this girl's gonna make it. I don't know how, when, what, but seeing her trajectory right now, she's just on fire. She's in Denver, is where she's originally from. But she's putting out music videos and content every week. She's on the radio over there. She's like opening at concerts, and she's just making her dreams come true. And so both of them, I think, are really great examples of that perseverance and dreams coming from some varied backgrounds. So I hope that you guys can join us if that is of interest to you. And we cannot thank you guys enough for this. Megan, if you can send me those tools, I will get them over to anybody who's interested in those tools. You can email us at mindsetsquared@gmail.com, or you can just message us and we'll make sure we get that to you. Yay. Thank you guys so much, friends.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to hopefully not have technical difficulties again. And last week, people were calling me. They're like, we can still hear you. I was like, oh, I guess I'm still live. So I'm going to go figure out how to get off live and recording at the same time. So thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful rest of your Monday and be productive.
Yes.
But don't listen to Misty. Be productive.
No.
All right. Bye, guys. Thank you.